Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, a name that once struck fear into the highest levels of law enforcement and dominated headlines worldwide. His rise from a poor village in Mexico to becoming the most powerful drug trafficker in history is the stuff of legend. But no empire lasts forever. This is the story of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power. A story of a man who built an empire from the shadows only to watch it crumble before his eyes. Joaquín Guzmán was born on April 4, 1957, in La Tuna, a remote village in Mexico's Sinaloa region. Life was harsh, with limited opportunities. From a young age, he worked in the fields, dreaming of something greater. As a boy, he realized that ambition and connections mattered more than hard labor. He soon caught the attention of powerful figures in the underground economy. His sharp mind and fearlessness set him apart, paving the way for his rapid rise in a world few dared to enter. Guzmán started as a low-level worker handling logistics and ensuring smooth shipments. Unlike others, he understood that success wasn't just about force, but strategy. His problem-solving skills and calm under pressure earned him the trust of key figures. By his early 20s, he was managing crucial operations, overseeing trade routes, and expanding his network. He was no longer just a participant. He was becoming a leader in a world ruled by power and influence. By the 1980s, Guzmán had become a key figure in an expanding network. He wasn't just moving shipments, he was designing routes, negotiating deals, and eliminating risks. Understanding logistics was everything. He pioneered new transport methods for efficiency and discretion. His innovative thinking and ambition made him invaluable. But in a world where trust was fragile, power had to be carefully maintained. Rising fast, danger was never far behind. As Guzmán's influence grew, so did his ambitions. He saw an opportunity to reshape the business, making operations faster and more secure. Investing in underground tunnels, he moved shipments undetected across borders. These tunnels were hidden, efficient, and nearly impossible to trace. His strategic mind set him apart, outmaneuvering rivals and authorities alike. But with growing power came growing enemies. Rivals saw him as a threat, and law enforcement began to take notice. By the early 1990s, Guzmán had become a dominant figure with operations spanning multiple regions and a rapidly expanding network. But power attracts enemies. Rival groups saw him as a threat, sparking violent conflicts over territory and influence. Despite the dangers, Guzmán stayed one step ahead, using strategic alliances, bribery, and innovation to maintain control. However, authorities were closing in, determined to dismantle his empire. His next challenge was survival. In 1993, an assassination attempt on Guzmán went horribly wrong when rivals targeted him at an airport, resulting in unintended casualties. The incident sparked national outrage, prompting authorities to act. Days later, he was captured in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico. Sentenced to 20 years, many believed his reign was over. However, Guzmán saw prison not as the end, but as an obstacle. Even behind bars, he remained influential, quietly planning his next move. Inside prison, Guzmán maintained control, building connections, bribing officials, and ensuring his operations continued. His influence extended beyond the prison walls, showing his power wasn't diminished. But he wasn't just surviving, he was planning an escape. In 2001, after years of preparation, he escaped with the help of corrupt guards, slipping out of the high-security facility and vanishing into the mountains. His legend and empire grew. After his escape, Guzmán quickly rebuilt, strengthening alliances, expanding operations, and securing new smuggling routes. His ability to evade capture made him a mythic figure, both feared and admired. While authorities intensified their pursuit, he stayed hidden, protected by loyal followers, constantly on the move using remote hideouts and underground networks. His influence grew, and the Sinaloa organization became more powerful. But the chase was far from over. His enemies were closing in. For over a decade, Guzmán remained untouchable. His network was vast, security tight, and operations profitable. Living in secrecy, he stayed ahead of authorities. Despite the global manhunt, he expanded his influence and forged international partnerships. His confidence grew, but so did the pressure. In 2014, after years of intelligence gathering, authorities tracked him down and captured him in a dramatic raid at a seaside resort, marking a turning point in his story. His arrest was a major victory for authorities, but Guzmán had no intention of staying behind bars. He was sent to a high-security prison, but his influence remained strong. He studied weaknesses in the facility, patiently planning his next move. In 2015, he pulled off one of the most daring escapes in history through a mile-long tunnel leading directly to his cell. The tunnel was expertly built, complete with ventilation and lighting. Once again, he vanished into the shadows. His escape humiliated authorities and reignited the global manhunt. Despite the pressure, Guzmán resumed business as usual, confident he could evade capture, but this time, mistakes were made. His growing public profile and a secret meeting with well-known figures drew unwanted attention. Intelligence agencies tracked his communications, narrowing his location. In early 2016, a raid was launched. After a dramatic shootout, Guzmán was captured once again. This time, there would be no escape. Following his capture, Guzmán was swiftly extradited to the United States and placed in a highly secure facility, cut off from his network. His 2019 trial was one of the most high-profile in history, with witnesses detailing his operations, alliances, and betrayals. Despite his past successes, the evidence was overwhelming. He was found guilty on multiple charges and sentenced to life in prison. Locked in a supermax facility, his empire continued, but his reign was officially over. Even behind bars, Guzmán remained a symbol of power. He was sent to ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the US, designed to hold the world's most dangerous individuals. Isolated for 23 hours a day, his communication was strictly monitored, cutting him off from the outside world. Meanwhile, his organization adapted. Leadership shifted, with his sons and former allies taking control. Though Guzmán was gone, the influence he built remained, proving that his legacy would outlive his freedom. Despite Guzmán's imprisonment, the Sinaloa organization remained strong. His sons, Los Chapitos, took over key operations, ensuring the network thrived. Authorities intensified efforts to dismantle it, but its deep connections made it nearly impossible to eliminate. While Guzmán sat in solitary confinement, the business evolved to meet new challenges. His downfall was a victory for law enforcement, but it did little to slow the system he had built. Guzmán's story became legend, a tale of ambition, power, and inevitable downfall. Some saw him as a criminal mastermind, others as a symbol of resistance. Documentaries, books, and news reports dissected his rise and fall, turning him into one of the most infamous figures of modern history. But beyond the headlines, his impact remained. The organization he built still operated, and the challenges authorities faced remained the same. His chapter had ended, but the larger story was far from over. As years passed, Guzmán remained locked away, his influence fading with time. His once unmatched ability to control operations from afar was now impossible under the extreme security measures of his prison. Yet, outside, the organization adapted. New players emerged, alliances shifted, and the cycle continued. His name still carried weight, but the world had moved on. The empire he built no longer needed him. In the end, he was just another chapter in a much larger, never-ending story. From a poor village in Sinaloa to the most secure prison in the United States, Guzmán's journey was unlike any other. His rise was fueled by intelligence, ambition, and a deep understanding of power. His fall was inevitable. No empire lasts forever. Today, his story serves as a reminder of how influence can shape history, but also how no one is truly untouchable. Behind the concrete walls of his prison cell, he now faces the one opponent he cannot escape: time itself. As Guzmán spends his days in near-total isolation, the world outside continues to change. The once feared leader is now a forgotten figure in a system that has moved beyond him. His organization, though still powerful, has evolved without his command. Law enforcement continues its fight, but new names rise, new strategies emerge, and the cycle persists. For Guzmán, the days of power, influence, and escape are over. His story is now a cautionary tale of ambition, excess, and inevitable downfall. Locked away in ADX Florence, Guzmán lives a life far removed from his former empire. No more tunnels, no more secret meetings, just silence and confinement. His days are spent in a small concrete cell, with little connection to the outside world. The man who once controlled billions now has nothing but time. While his name still carries weight, he is no longer a key player. His story has been written, but the world he helped create continues, adapting to new leaders and new challenges. The world remembers Guzmán, but only as a figure of the past. His influence once shaped entire regions, yet now, he is confined to history. His cartel has moved forward without him, adapting to modern challenges, shifting strategies, and finding new ways to survive. Law enforcement celebrates his capture as a victory, but the larger fight remains. Power changes hands, but the system endures. For Guzmán, there are no more moves to make, only the quiet reality of a life behind bars. As time passes, Guzmán becomes more of a legend than a present threat, his name etched in history but no longer commanding power. His cartel, once ruled by his every decision, now operates independently under new leadership. Governments continue their fight, but the challenges remain. The war on organized crime is far from over. Meanwhile, in his solitary cell, Guzmán faces the ultimate fate of those who rise to higher relevance. The world moves on, with or without him. Once feared and untouchable, Guzmán is now just another inmate, locked away from the empire he built. His story, once filled with high-stakes escapes and endless power, has settled into a quiet, uneventful routine. No more negotiations, no more hidden tunnels, just the same four walls, day after day. Outside, the world forgets, new names take over, and the cycle continues. For Guzmán, the fight is over. His legacy, once built on dominance, fades into the background of history. Guzmán's days are now predictable, waking up in a small concrete cell, eating alone, and pacing within the same few meters of space. No phone calls, no secret meetings, no influence beyond these walls. The man who once controlled a global network is now reduced to a number in the prison system. His mind, once sharp and calculating, has nothing left to plan. The world outside continues to shift, evolve, and adapt, but for Guzmán, every day is the same. His story is finished. The once powerful leader now exists in complete isolation, far removed from the chaos he once controlled. The empire he built thrives without him, its leadership adapting to new challenges. His name, once feared and respected, is now a distant memory in a world that has moved on. For Guzmán, there are no more negotiations, no more escapes, only the slow passage of time. His influence has faded, his power dissolved. In the end, the man who once had everything is left with nothing. In the quiet of his prison cell, Guzmán has nothing but time to reflect on the choices that brought him here, time to think about a world he can no longer influence. The power he once held is gone, his voice no longer commands armies, and his name no longer inspires fear. Outside, the cycle continues with new faces, new leaders, and the same battles. But for Guzmán, the game is over, his empire has outgrown him, and history has already moved on. As years pass, Guzmán becomes a relic of the past, his story told in documentaries, books, and courtroom transcripts. The empire he built no longer belongs to him, shaped instead by new leaders with their own ambitions. His name, once whispered in fear, fades into the archives of history. The system he thrived in continues, unchanged by his absence. In his small prison cell, far from the world he once ruled, he is left with nothing but memories of a life that no longer exists. Guzmán's world has shrunk to the confines of his prison cell, a stark contrast to the empire he once commanded. The luxuries, power, and resources gone. His influence, once global, now extends only to the cold concrete walls around him. While his cartel continues, the world no longer waits for his next move. Time erodes his relevance, and the legend of El Chapo fades. In the end, he is just another prisoner, forgotten by the empire he built. Once at the center of a global empire, Guzmán is now a footnote in history. The world he once controlled no longer belongs to him. His cartel has evolved, adapting to new challenges, new leaders, and new strategies. The power he once wielded has been divided, his name remembered but no longer feared. In the silence of his prison cell, there are no more deals to make, no more escape plans to execute, only the slow, inevitable realization that his time has passed. With every passing year, Guzmán's influence fades further. His name, once a symbol of dominance, now lingers only in legal records and history books. The empire he built moves forward without him, run by men who never needed his permission. Locked away in isolation, his world is reduced to routine and reflection. No more escapes, no more power plays, just the slow ticking of time. For a man who once ruled the shadows, there is nothing left but the quiet weight of his own irrelevance. Guzmán, once larger than life, now lives in complete obscurity. The world moves on, new players emerge, and his absence barely disrupts the cycle. The system he once controlled has outgrown him, adapting to new methods and technologies. His former allies, his enemies, all continue their battles without him. He was once a force of nature, but now he is just a man, stripped of power, influence, and control. The empire he built remains, but its king has long been forgotten. The legend of El Chapo once dominated headlines, but now his story is just another chapter in the never-ending cycle of power and downfall. His name may still echo in history, but it no longer holds weight in the world he once ruled. Behind prison walls, he fades into the background, while new leaders take center stage. The empire he built survives without him, proving that no one, not even the most powerful, can escape the inevitability of time and change. As the years pass, Guzmán's fate is sealed. He no longer shapes the future, he merely watches from the sidelines, trapped in a reality he cannot control. The world outside has moved forward, adapting to new leaders, new tactics, and new conflicts. His influence, once uncheckable, is now a distant memory. For all the power he once held, he is now powerless. No more deals, no more escapes, just the slow, inevitable march of time, erasing his legacy one forgotten day at a time. In the end, Guzmán's greatest enemy was not law enforcement or rival organizations, it was time itself. The empire he built survives, but his role in it has long since faded. The world continues without him, evolving beyond his control. Once feared, once untouchable, he is now just another name in history, confined to a life of isolation. No more power, no more escape, no more influence. For El Chapo, the final truth is clear: the empire outlives the man, but the man is always forgotten. And so, the story of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán reaches its inevitable conclusion. Once a mastermind of strategy and survival, now a prisoner of time. His legacy, once built on power and fear, has faded into history, overshadowed by new names, new conflicts, and the endless cycle of ambition. The world he ruled no longer remembers him as a leader, only as a cautionary tale. In the end, every empire falls, and for Guzmán, the fall was absolute. His name, once a symbol of power, is now a distant memory. The organization he built continues without him, adapting to new threats and opportunities. The world has moved on, and Guzmán, once at the center of it all, is left behind. His story is no longer one of dominance, but of decline. The rise, the escapes, the control, it all led to this, a life confined to a cell, where his influence has vanished, and his legend fades, day by day, into history. El Chapo's reign is over. The man who once commanded an empire now spends his days in solitude, a prisoner of both the system and time itself. No more escapes, no more power plays, only the slow, fading remnants of a name that once meant everything. His story, once filled with action and control, is now reduced to silence. The world outside moves forward, but for him, time stands still. In the end, the empire survives, but its king is long forgotten. With every passing year, Guzmán drifts further from relevance. His name, once a force of influence, is now just another entry in history books. His empire thrives without him, proving that no single leader is ever truly indispensable. The corridors of power he once walked are filled with new faces, new deals, new wars. Yet for him, the world has shrunk to the size of a prison cell. The legacy he built continues, but the man himself has been left behind, erased by time. In the shadows of his concrete cell, Guzmán exists but no longer matters. The world he once ruled no longer needs him, no longer fears him. New leaders have taken control, new battles are fought, and his influence has faded into history. The corridors of power now belong to others. His greatest enemy was not the law, nor his rivals, it was time. And time, relentless and unforgiving, has finally won. The legend of El Chapo is over, replaced by the silence of a forgotten man. Joaquín Guzmán's story ends not in power, but in isolation. The empire he built continues, but without him at the helm. The world moves forward, forgetting the man who once controlled so much. His name, once whispered in fear, now gathers dust in the archives of history. No more power, no more influence, just endless days in confinement. His empire survived, but his time has passed. In the end, El Chapo was not unstoppable. He was just another man lost to time. And so, the once feared king of an empire fades into obscurity. The world he shaped continues without him, evolving beyond his reach. The headlines that once carried his name now focus on new figures, new battles, new power struggles. His empire, like all before it, has adapted, proving that no leader is ever truly irreplaceable. Alone in his prison cell, Guzmán has nothing left but memories. The legend he built is now history, and history always moves on. With each passing day, the world forgets a little more. The name Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, once synonymous with power and control, is now just a relic of the past. His story, once filled with ambition and survival, has settled into the quiet routine of a life behind bars. No more deals, no more escapes, only the slow erosion of time. The empire he built stands, but its former king is long forgotten, left behind by the very world he once ruled. The empire endures, but its ruler has been erased. Locked away, Guzmán no longer holds influence, no longer commands loyalty. The power he once wielded has been scattered among new leaders, new names rising in his absence. He is no longer a threat, no longer a force, just another inmate, lost in the endless routine of confinement. The cycle continues, but without him, time has moved forward, and in its wake, El Chapo is nothing more than a shadow of the past.